Hello and welcome to the Sport Geeks third part of our four-part series where we cover position by position our fantasy rankings for this upcoming season. I'm Andy, this is Dylan, and we hope to have a good show for you tonight. Barring any technical difficulties, I cannot promise no technical difficulties because Google Hangouts can be pretty inconsistent. So that's a thing. If you didn't catch our wide receiver video, or if you caught the first part, you notice at the end, Dylan did have his cameo appearance, but we did have a second part as well to finish the deal. I think it's like 13, 15 minutes long, where we cover our 10th guys, sleepers, and things of that nature. I know quite a few people watched the first episode, but not many got to the second, so we didn't, I don't know if, we're confused at the end, like, oh, where's the rest of the video? So that's that. But today, running backs. So, yeah, this was hard. Dylan and I were talking about this, and it was definitely difficult. Dylan, you had a lot of trouble with this list, didn't you?
Yeah, with more so than I anticipated. I thought going into this, like running back, it's going to be a bit hard, but there's these top guys and there's a little bit of a drop in there because it's shallow. It gives you a small field to choose from. But I narrowed down to like a list of 15 guys for these 10 spots. And then, so narrowing that 15 down to 10 and then putting those 10 in order was a task I don't want to say I wasn't prepared for it, but it was a bit tougher than I had expected out of this.
Yeah, I thought the wide receivers were going to be harder than this one, to be quite honest. And when I looked at it for the first time, you kind of have like, looking at my list right now, I could probably see eight of the 10 guys, they were going to be there. But the order was the toughest part because running backs are so, each one, some are really good, but the durability isn't there and things like that. And it's really, as I said in the wide receiver video, I'm a big guy in durability, and running back is a spot that is not durable. Like, you have to assume that, the majority of the good running backs miss a game or have a game where they don't get a lot of carries because they're banged up. So, it's playing with fire, pick your poison. But running backs also average usually the most points. So that's important. So I'm going to start my number one player, and it's not necessarily because I think he's the best player in fantasy, just like the wide receiver video. I have Jamal Charles at number one of the Kansas City Chiefs going into this season. A few years ago, he wasn't number one. He has had durability concerns before, but I think he's going to have a good year. I think he is a very good fantasy running back for sure, and he has proven that, as I just said. And you got to also think about what does Kansas City really have? They have Jeremy Maclin. So they're going to keep feeding Charles the ball, whether it's receptions out of the backfield in PPR or just getting the touches as a running back itself. He's going to give you points, and he's also going to – right now he's slated to play all 16 games. And if you're going to draft before the season, not many of these guys you can say, hey, they're going to probably play 16 games. And I would think Charles is going to be a good bet for 16, barring a crazy injury. So I have Charles as number one.
For me at number one in running backs, I have Le'Veon Bell. He was number one running back last year, and to some people this is a tough sell because his suspension was reduced, but he's still going to be missing at least 2 games of the season. And well, he's going to be missing 2 for suspension. If he misses any more, it'd be injury. But he's 23 years old. He broke out in a very big way last year. He had 1,300 yards and he had 800 receiving yards, 83 receptions. So he gets you points in multiple different ways. I think we've said this every single episode so far with Big Ben and Antonio Brown. There's no reason to believe that this offense can't produce similar in terms of the fantasy as it did last year, and they could be a team to watch out for offensively this year. And I think Bell, while it's a risk that in weeks 1 and 2 you're going to need to make sure you have a good fill-in, whether that's backup D'Angelo Williams for the Steelers or somebody you draft a little later, I think Le'Veon Bell, even without the 2 games, will make a strong case for number 1 again this year.
Oh, speaking of Le'Veon Bell, I have him at number 2 on my list. Le'Veon Bell is my favorite running back in the NFL. I drafted him in all 3 leagues last year. I know I kept him in the keeper league I'm in, and I don't want to seem big-headed, but I feel like I called it. And he's the real deal. And if he didn't miss the 2 games, like the Calvin Johnson thing, like I said last week, you're the best player, but you're not playing all the games. So in the end, you're not going to have as many points. And that's the fact of the matter. But Bell's going to be close to Charles in terms of output at the end with 2 less games. And with all those catches, in PPR, 90 divided by 16, you're guaranteed 5-6 points just in receptions alone. 10 yards a reception, you're guaranteed 12 points a week in receptions alone out of Le'Veon Bell, and that is hard to come by. You really can't look at the list of running backs and be like, oh, a guaranteed 12 week in, week out, essentially, and that's crazy. I am a big Le'Veon Bell fan. I got offered AJ Green for him and a first-round pick, and I'm not going to take it because Le'Veon Bell is a running back you can't look past.
My number 2 I'm going to start off by saying it's a guy that I was surprised. He definitely climbed his way up in my rankings, and he even garnered consideration for number 1 for a little while when I was thinking about Bell. But Marshawn Lynch. Going into last year, we saw him slip in a couple draft boards. People were worried about his age, his health, his workload, because he's had so many carries for so long. And people were saying, like, watch out for Christian Michael and Robert Turbin as sleepers. And what did Marshawn Lynch do? He was better than the year before. More rushing yards on less carries, 1 more rushing touchdown, more receiving yards, 2 more receiving touchdowns. And he showed that he still can be beast mode. He earns the nickname. And with Seattle, they gained a receiving threat in Jimmy Graham. He might take away some red zone targets. Maybe Seattle's learned from the Super Bowl that they should just run it in the red zone. So Marshawn Lynch is a guy you can put your trust in. Strong runner. He's like the equivalent of a receiver when they say he's open when he's covered, because no matter how many people are around Marshawn Lynch, you have to half expect at least that there's a chance he's getting through all of them. And I think that makes him a great fantasy play this year.
I'll get to that later. I just thought of a really good comparison with Marshawn Lynch. But at number 3 for me, I have Eddie Lacy. Ranked number 1 by ESPN across all positions. Eddie Lacy is a very good football player. He's definitely a top 5 running back, and I can see why they have him at number 1 and things of that nature, because the Packers' offense is really good. But concussions are a concern. Missed a couple games the last couple years here, and especially if you're in a keeper or dynasty league, I would trade him for a running back that is just more durable, maybe a step below in terms of value, but somebody that you can rely on, because I think Eddie Lacy is going to be one of these running backs that plays really well, and we're going to get to a couple more later that I'm going to reference the same way. And I think you probably guess who those are going to be, but Lacy just isn't good for 16 games, and I don't think he's like Le'Veon Bell where he can be a guy that just puts up tons and tons of points. And, he's fighting for points there with Green Bay. Green Bay can have a great offense, and he can be a contributor, but the ball has to go around, and they do pass the ball a lot in Green Bay. So I don't know. I have Eddie Lacy at 3. He's a very good running back. Don't get me wrong. Definitely quality number 1 running back for you to have. But you also have to keep in mind you probably will have to fill in a guy a couple weeks because of injury.
My number 3 running back is also Eddie Lacy. I'm a little bit less concerned about the injury aspect than Andy. That's usually the case with most players. But he's put up at least 1,100 yards the past 2 years. 11 and 9 touchdowns. He increased by like 100, over 150 receiving yards from 2 years ago to last season, and I think it's hard to say safe because of the case that Andy just made against him for injury, but I think when he's on the field, he's a pretty safe play. There will be the days where Jordy Nelson will have like 200 receiving yards because that happens fairly often, I guess. Maybe not often, but it does happen. And those may be days where you'll get a little bit less out of Lacy, but you'll still get your very productive days. You'll get your top 5 running back, and I think throughout the whole season, you'll get a top 5 running back. And I think that's an important thing to address in your drafts. Make sure you get a top-end guy at the most shallow position.
I do agree with that. As a guy that usually goes running back, round 1, round 2, hopefully, depending on the pick. In Dylan's league, if I get pick 1, I'm probably screwed, and I'm not going to be able to go running back with ease. But that's true. You want a top-end running back, so Lacy definitely fills that void. Number 4 for me, Marshawn Lynch. Now, this comparison I just thought about, the way you're describing him just reminds me of Ricky Williams. Just it didn't matter how old he was. He just kept going and going and going. 300 carries this season, just putting up the yards, putting up the touchdowns. And fantasy wasn't as big of a deal when he was playing, but just that reminds me of him. However, Marshawn is a safe bet in my opinion for touchdowns, yards, and things of that nature. But I'm thinking Christian. I know you mentioned Christian Michael, and I'm not going to say that, oh, Christian Michael's a sleeper, because I'm not going to make a backup running back a sleeper. But I think, another year under his belt, he's going to keep taking some carries. Marshawn Lynch, his groin is starting to bother him year after year here, and he is getting older. And I know these are all the knocks that Dylan said that were against him last season, and I still have him in my top 5, but I think there's reasons why he's number 4 and not number 1. He's still a quality running back, and if you are late in the mid to late first round, and you need to get a running back, and Marshawn Lynch is definitely there. But you do have to keep in mind that these things are possible with him. And Jimmy Graham there, I think that also hurts his touchdowns in terms of near the red zone there, near the end zone, because Jimmy Graham's just going to go up and get the ball. So in the Super Bowl, if you have Jimmy Graham, Russell probably doesn't throw that interception because you throw it to Jimmy Graham, or you just run the ball. So Lynch at 4 for me.
My number 4, Jamal Charles of the Kansas City Chiefs. Prior to doing the actual construction of my list, he was the player that I anticipated having at number 1. And he's a player that I would not be surprised one bit if he did finish at number 1 in running back. But the things I've said about the past 3 guys, and combined with Charles, obviously he gets a ton of carries, ton of work. He gets receptions, yards, touchdowns. And we kind of saw that lessened a little bit last year. And while he doesn't have to shoulder as much of the workload as he has in the past, it could be just a matter, because he was just as good as he was the year before in terms of yards per carry. He had a couple less touchdowns, but he had 50 less carries, and he had 30 less receptions, but only 2 less receiving touchdowns. So we did see him a little bit less than what we would normally expect. I know last year Charles was, I think, very often a number 2, number 3 pick overall in the leagues. And I think he kind of fell short of that expectation. Certainly would not be surprised to see him finish higher, but the top 4 I had as a group that I had a lot of trouble ordering, and when it came down to it, he was just the guy that became the odd man out, and I put him at 4.
Yeah, I remember last year's draft. Peterson, Charles, McCoy, and I got McCoy and Bell. I really like that. And number 5 for me is the enigma in this ranking, and that is AP, Adrian Peterson, the best running back of the last 10 years, and he could be number 1, and none of us would be surprised. But I think we have to come with a little skepticism here. After having a year off, does this positively help him in his quest for 2,500 yards, breaking the record for most yards in a season? Or does this hurt him because he needs a little bit of a learning curve coming back with Teddy Bridgewater as a quarterback and things like that? I think it comes just – you're not wrong for picking Adrian Peterson at number 1. You're taking that risk, and last year it happened, and it backfired due to off-the-field issues. But I'm not – anywhere in round 1, if Adrian Peterson is there, you cannot go wrong picking him. I do not think that's going to be a bad decision. And if he falls to round 2, everybody drop the ball because he is definitely capable of being the best player in the league this season. It's just a matter of it's a matter of risk and things like that. So I don't know. I have nothing bad to say about Adrian Peterson. I don't think he's going to have any injury issues or anything like that. It's just a matter of if, 50-50, 75-25, however you want to look at it, if he is a very good fantasy pickup this year.
For me at number 5, this is where I also have Adrian Peterson. I completely agree with Andy that you can't go wrong taking him in the first round. And if you were to take him at number 1 overall, there's a little bit of a risk. It's a bold move, but it's one that could certainly pay off, and it's a move that could help you win the league. But you have to know that there's a little bit of a risk. I mean, last year he only played the 1 game due to the unforeseen circumstances, and you might say this is a poor comparison, but he had 75 rushing yards, which projects to 1,200 over a full year. He had no touchdowns, and a fun fact, that's the first time in his career that he did not have double-digit touchdowns, double-digit rushing touchdowns, to be more specific. And that really speaks volumes to when he's on the field, he produces. Even the year he tore his ACL, he came back the next year and he was better than ever. I think he was 8 or 9 yards away from the rushing record. And this time he didn't play the last 15 games of last year, but he's not coming back from a devastating knee injury that has ended careers before. He sat out the year because of personal issues and legal issues, and there's nothing health-wise to be as concerned about this year if you weren't concerned about him health-wise last year. And I think I have him at 5. Honestly, I wanted to put him higher, but it was a tough sell, so I think right in the middle is a safe spot. If you take him higher, it could certainly pay off. If you take him lower, it could end up as a steal, a late first-round steal. And Peterson's definitely a player to watch, though, this year in fantasy.
He is. He truly is. We're at the midway point, by the way, and we'll keep talking about Peterson because nobody's here anyways viewing it right now. But by the way, at these halfway points, this is where you comment and give your opinion on at least our top 5. Maybe put down yours and we'll talk about it. And if it's relevant to what we are talking about, we will surely reply to it in the comments like we have in the past with Chris and other people like that. So, give it a like. If you like the video, subscribe. I think we gained 1 subscriber this week. Woohoo. Thank you. And things like that. So, but Adrian Peterson, I think you could probably write him down for 250 carries, 300 touches this year in terms of carries and receptions. And he just, if he is there and I'm drafting in the fantasy football league this year, there's a good chance I'm going to take him. And if it backfires, it backfires. But I don't know. Adrian Peterson is definitely somebody that I would not feel bad about having on my team. Dylan, I know I've said this a couple times during this show, but do you believe at least all of the top 5 running backs will go in the first round of a standard or even in our league? Or do you think that somebody may slip into the second round?
I think I've kind of alluded to this in past episodes, but like as an owner, sometimes you have to know who's in your league with you. In a standard league, the 5 running backs we've listed so far, I would expect to go in round 1 because running back's a shallow position. So even if you're in a 2 quarterback league, I think there's a good chance at least all 5 of those running backs are gone, maybe even a couple more running backs, especially for standard. But running back's so shallow that it's something you pretty much have to address soon, or else it's going to be tough to, unless you're really good at picking out sleepers, it's going to be tough to fill in that void later. And even during the season, if you try to trade, people might not be so willing to give up the shallowest position at a fair price.
Oh, yeah. There could start talking about hockey when it comes to trading guys at fair prices. There's no player rater in our fantasy football league, so there is no God. Yeah, so hopefully you commented. If not, so be it. We're gonna cover our last 5 here, 6 through 10. Give an honorable mention and a sleeper. Please, at the end of the video, comment as you will. Like the video if you like it. Share it. You may not want to share it because you don't want your friends to know if you really trust us. If so, I'm flattered. But yeah, so that's a thing there. Dylan, who do you have at number 6?
Number 6 on my top 10 running backs is Arian Foster. He does have durability issues, and Andy and I co-owned a team last year. We had him. I believe he missed 3 games, and he still finished as a top 5 running back in that league. He 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns. He does get receptions, and if he's on the field, he's almost definitively going to produce for you. Sometimes it's a big if, though. He is a guy that has had issues in the past with injuries, so you might not be overly surprised if he misses a couple games. But if you're drafting him this high, you have to expect that when you do have him, he'll be worth this and he'll warrant this high of a pick.
You mentioned that team. I know people from that league are going to see this and, hey, man, that team, I don't want that team. I've never seen the Mona Lisa before in real life, but I'm pretty sure I saw it in fantasy football until Dylan took a bucket of paint and dumped it on the Mona Lisa. Geez. Jordan Matthews. I'll never have him, ever. We didn't talk about him last week for good reason. Number 6 for me, Matt Forte. A guy that's very similar to Arian Foster in terms of you don't play all the games every season. I think the last couple of years he's been a little bit better, but he had a couple-year patch there where it was like you get injured every season. for 2 or 3 games, and it's really causing me a problem in my fantasy football league. And that stigma continues for me, because if you get injured a couple seasons in a row, you're labeled, you're a durability concern. And Matt Forte is a very solid running back choice. A couple of years ago, he was the Le'Veon Bell. He had 6 catches a game, 100 yards rushing a game with those 6 catches, and he just produced. And I have him at 6, even though I really brought him down with all those injury concerns, because Brandon Marshall's gone. And I know they have Kevin White, I believe. I believe they drafted Kevin White. They might have drafted somebody else, but I don't know. I think it was Kevin White. And they really are going to – I think they're just going to run the ball more this year. I think with John Fox, I know they passed the ball a lot in Denver, but John Fox comes from Carolina, where they had Stephen Davis, Deshaun Foster, and somebody best. Couldn't tell you who it is. Somebody best, I thought. But I think they're going to run the ball a lot in Chicago this year, and I think Matt Forte is going to be the guy to reap the benefits. So I have Matt Forte at 6.
My number 7, Matt Forte of the Chicago Bears. He was a guy I did have a little bit of trouble with, him and Foster, which order to put them in. Ultimately, I liked Foster a little bit better. And I think Foster, if you give me 16 games of both Foster and Forte, I'd probably take Foster. And I think that kind of separated them a little bit. And Matt Forte, Andy said it, he's been a great running back. He had 1,000 rushing yards last year, the year before. The one stat that I found particularly crazy in my research, he had 102 receptions last year on 130 targets for a running back. Especially if you're in PPR, that bumps him up a couple spots in the rankings, certainly. And I know he was injured a little bit, but that was with Brandon Marshall on the team. He's gone. So you're going to have to wonder, Alshon Jeffrey's going to have to step up to be wide receiver 1. And maybe we've seen he puts up the stats to do that in the past, but maybe Jay Cutler will want to rely a little bit more on one of the top veterans on that offense. And I certainly wouldn't bet for more targets or more receptions, but if he does it again, we know it's something that he's done in the past, so you could certainly see it. And people do have a little concern about his age. I think this goes for Foster and Peterson a little bit too, but I thought of this comparison when I was making my rankings. Like, I had my first 4, and then there's 5, 6, 7. If you like baseball, you'll get this. If you don't, you'll think I'm speaking Japanese or something. But like, Paul Goldschmidt and Anthony Rizzo are gone, so you take Albert Pujols. But Albert Pujols has 30 home runs this year, number 2 first baseman in fantasy. So you can take one of the younger guys, but if you end up with Peterson, Foster, Forte, they're a little bit older, but they could easily crack that top 4.
He's got a retirement home for a fantasy baseball team, and it's working well. You could call them the New Jersey Devils of 2011. Wasn't that the year 2011? I don't remember what year it was. They went to the Cup. Number 7 for me, Arian Foster. Exactly what Dylan said. He's a top 5 running back that cannot stay healthy. We had him along with Lacey and – no, we didn't. We had Foster, Lacey, Foster, and Bell. Foster, if you draft Foster, you have to draft Alfred Blue later. You have to get the handcuff, because I think most people have confirmed now, especially with Blue playing decent last year, that Blue's going to get a couple starts. So you have to have him. And I think that's what brings Foster down. You have to draft Blue with him later in the draft. He is very inconsistent in terms of how well he does. Some games he'll put up 200 yards. Other games he'll put up 70. Excuse me. But Very, very good fantasy running back. You know, at number 6, or I mean at number 7 for me, you're getting him in the second round. So to pair him, if you're probably at the end of the first round. Say you got a guy like a guy like Forte, to pair Forte and Foster together, you're pretty set for this year. You're like going in. Not many people are going to have that ability to be like, hey, I have two good running backs that can perform week in and week out. So Arian Foster at number 7 for me makes sense.
On to number 8. I've been waiting for 2.5 episodes to talk about a Buffalo Bill. And unfortunately, EJ Manuel and Sammy Watkins haven't come up yet. So LaShawn Shady McCoy is my number 8 running back. He was another guy. He was probably most often a top 5 overall pick last year. And on Philly, he didn't quite match what he did the year before. He had about 300 less yards, a significant drop in receptions and receiving yards. And you can chalk that up to a number of reasons. Maybe you believe the rumors that Chip Kelly's a bit power hungry and wanted to get rid of all those players, and that could be something that worked against him. Maybe it was just a down year. You never know. But on the positives, he's coming to Buffalo. That's never been a positive for someone before. But it's a great atmosphere. We got Rex Ryan, who's really, like, the outlook of the entire team has just looked way more positive than it has for a while. And you know he's going to be the key piece of our offense. There's a lot of uncertainty at quarterback. We have some solid receivers, but at running back, LaShawn McCoy should get a ton of carries this year. Him and Greg Roman want to do that power run, and that should work very well with LaShawn McCoy. Even if Fred Jackson does take some carries away, I think you should still expect some very good production out of McCoy this year.
Unlike Dylan, I am a realist Bills fan, and I must say I was not waiting for this moment, but I also have LaShawn McCoy at number 8. And the reason EJ Manuel wasn't on the quarterback list because he's not going to start. But LaShawn McCoy, number 8. The reason I have him here, and I kind of hesitated because I thought to myself last year he wasn't as good as he should have been. And you don't really know how this running back trio is going to do because you also have Boobie Dixon there. Fred is going to get 10 carries a game. Boobie's going to get 5-10 carries a game. So are they going to run the ball 40 times? They want to. They want to run the ball 40 times. And if they do that, LaShawn McCoy is a top 10 running back. If they don't, I don't know if he is. Lucky for him, he can play in all 3 down situations, but so can Freddie. So I know we all love Freddie, and he is one of the favorites amongst the Bills Mafia. But I must say LaShawn McCoy is number 8 for me. But I think it's just like it's based on workload, not necessarily how he's going to do ability-wise. I think he's going to average like 4 yards a carry, but that's because of workload. He's going to, have 250 carries and 1,000 yards, probably 400 receiving yards, something like that. And, he's definitely a top 10 running back. Definitely. I'm kind of skeptical on how this is going to work out amongst the 3 of them.
It's a fair concern. On the number 9, this might have been a guy you've been waiting for to show up on somebody's list. DeMarco Murray, 1,800 rushing yards and doesn't show up until number 9. DeMarco Murray, don't get me wrong, he's a very talented running back. His yards per carry last year was actually lower than it was the year before. He had just finally been healthy enough to play the whole year. And I'm sure that'll come up if Andy talks about Murray at some point, but he has had injury problems. And Dallas's offensive line was, in my opinion, probably easily the best in the league last year, and a big reason why he got to 1,800. Now, going to Philly, that certainly doesn't kill him because we have seen LaShawn McCoy, who we just talked about, be a successful running back in Philly for years. But DeMarco Murray, even if he's healthy and plays all 16 games, I still would never expect another 1,800-yard season out of him. I think he could certainly be very well. He could get to the 1,500 maybe, but health's a concern. A change of scenery, you always have to have a little bit of, I don't want to say skepticism, but you have to be aware that he might be more, there's a slimmer chance that he's more successful, or there's a chance he's not as successful, or maybe he's exactly the same guy. So that's something to watch out for, and I have DeMarco Murray at number 9.
I'll talk about him later, but not not in my top 10. But that's for later. Number 9, C.J. Anderson, Denver Broncos. One of the best, if not the best, offense in football. Said the same thing about Eddie Lacy. C.J. Anderson, when healthy, is a very good running back. Young running backs, only going to get better. I think with Peyton Manning there, I did put Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders in my top 10. And I did put Manning at number 1. But I think you have to think about Manning's age. Will he throw the ball 500 times, or are they going to start relying more on C.J. Anderson? Knowing that they have a younger running back now, are they going to take the younger running back and use him more, which would make complete sense to not overwork Manning, whose arm is getting a little fatigued here, playing as much as he is and throwing the ball as much as he is. So I think C.J. Anderson is a very solid option at number 9. I think he's going to get you many rushing touchdowns. I think he's going to definitely catch the ball a lot out of the backfield because they are a pass-oriented team. But I think last year he was a very good pickup for anybody that did snag him. Sadly, I was a guy with Ronnie Hillman. So that's the thing. I have C.J. Anderson at number 9, and I don't know. I think he's a very solid number 2 for somebody in the late second, early third round.
You make a good case for C.J. Anderson. He's a guy I gave fair consideration to at 10. But as you said, you were a guy who had Ronnie Hillman. I was the guy who had Monte Ball. And I think it's a risk. So ultimately there were honestly 5 guys I considered at number 10. And I went with the guy that I felt was safest. But until doing this research, I never really viewed him as that. And it's Alfred Morris of the Redskins. He's rushed for at least 1,000 yards every year he's been in the league so far. He did rush for 1,600 in his rookie year. I don't know if he'll ever get back to that, but consistently 1,000 yards. He's had 7 and 8 touchdowns the past few years. His receptions and receiving yards just about doubled. And he is, I want to say, like, because most of this I was unaware of prior to doing this research, and he's like quietly a very safe pick to be. Maybe you're running back 2, or depending on how your draft's going. So I think he's a solid pick at number 10. Overall, the consistency, I guess, is what put him above the other 4 for me. And I do believe there is upside. As much as Andy and I have disagreed about this in the past, there's still a part of me that holds hope that RG3 can make that offense really good again. And even if he doesn't, they'll rely on the run game. I think he's the most reliable part of that offense. And if the rest can do well, I think it'll only help him.
Sorry, Dylan, not second round good. Not second round good. Alfred Morris, I pretty much am just going to say ditto, really. I have him at number 10, and literally that's what I thought about when I was putting my list on. I was like, who do I put at number 10? And I was like, Alfred Morris. Everybody says he's a top guy. I knew he was the safe pick. I knew that part. I didn't know that he had as many catches as he did and was as good as he was. But I've heard many times that Alfred Morris is a very safe running back. Like, you're going to get 1,000 yards. You're going to get your points. He's not going to blow you away and put up 200 yards, but he's going to give you 100. And that is something that not many running backs can do in this league week in and week out. And not many running backs in general are putting up 1,000 yards anymore. And I think with that, you have to take your honorable mentions and things like that and think, how many of these guys actually have proven themselves? Not as many when you look at your lists that we're going to talk about later, the guys that are on our lists as being solid options, be like, that's a safe pick. I think Alfred Morris is a safe top 10 running back, and I don't think you go wrong picking him. I think you're not making a mistake. And I think in this top 10, we can say all these guys you really can't make a mistake with. But Alfred Morris, if you have Alfred Morris, I'm going to start him every week because he's going to give me what I'm looking for. He's going to give me a solid showing. He's going to give me some points, and I know what I'm going to get. And, you need some of those safe guys in these top 10s because a lot of people would think, oh, well, your top 10 should be a guy that sneaks up on you. A lot of people don't realize how good Alfred Morris really is, kind of like Ryan Tannehill was in the quarterback one. I had him at 10 and moved him out, but he was a top 10 quarterback under the radar, just like Alfred Morris is a top 10 running back under the radar. So Alfred Morris was number 10 for both of us.
That wraps up our top 10, but for honorable mentions, I told you I had 5 guys in consideration for the number 10 spot. For time's sake, Andy and I are each doing one, and mine is, I'm reluctant to call him my boy, but Lamar Miller. I liked him in 2013 when nobody else did, and people were telling me, like, there's no reason to like this guy. He's bad, and I saw something in him. But he only got 700 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then the following year, still nobody likes him. I draft him again, despite telling Andy to never let me draft him again. And I think I had him in one of my leagues, maybe. And he broke 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, 275 receiving yards. And most people didn't see that coming after the poor showing this year. His yards per carry went up by 1.1. So the reason I chose to talk about him is because I've believed him for a while and he kind of broke out, and I think he could certainly do that again. As Bills fans, as much as I hate to say this, if Tannehill is the sleeper or out fringe top 10 quarterback that we discussed, if Miller can be the fringe top 10 running back, and maybe you get some good production out of Jarvis Landry, Jordan Cameron, Miami could have a pretty good offense, and some of those players could put up some pretty good points for you in terms of fantasy.
Lamar Miller, huh? I didn't have him in my honorable mentions, but Lamar Miller, Miami's just something to me. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a Bills fan, but Miami just is honorable mentions, I'll just name a couple that I had and then go into depth on the one guy that I left out of my top 10 that was number 1 last year. I feel it's only right that I do say why I didn't have him in my top 10. But honorable mentions also, Mark Ingram, very good running back last year. Jeremy Hill, very good running back. Gio Bernard, I guess. Jeremy Hill, Gio Bernard. You're messing with fire. But who knows? But honorable mention, DeMarco Murray, Philly Eagles. All right, 1,800 yards last year. Injury concerns. Everybody knows by the end of this episode. Injury concerns are make or break for me. If you have injury concerns, I do not want you on my team. And I think when you look at LaShawn McCoy's numbers last year and how well he did the year before, and Chip Kelly really getting into his offense, it's not as running back friendly as Dallas's was. And also, you have to think about this. You've got Ryan Matthews, who is a good running back, but can never stay healthy. So if he gets 15 carries a game out of the 40 that are coming to be split up, he's not going to get hurt. So I think Ryan Matthews is going to eat some of DeMarco's carries as it is. And one of the top 100 players in the NFL voted on by the players, Darren Sproles. He's old. He's old, but he is the best third down running back the world has ever seen. So I think third down is pretty much owned by Darren Sproles. So DeMarco Murray also has fumbling issues, which is probably a bigger pet peeve for me than his injury concerns. So, that's why I had to explain why he wasn't in my top 10, and that's why. I don't think DeMarco Murray is going to have a very good season because the Eagles just are set up to have a running back tandem going that keeps everybody healthy but nobody extremely productive fantasy-wise.
And up next, my sleeper. This is one I had trouble finding a sleeper, and then this guy kind of came to me, so I decided I liked it and I would go with it. Well, Mark Ingram was also in my honorable mentions, and I had him on multiple teams last year. CJ Spiller, a guy us in Buffalo are very familiar with, is joining the New Orleans backfield. We have seen backfields where you can have multiple running backs productive from a fantasy standpoint. And we've seen specifically in New Orleans fantasy running backs who get a lot of their production via receptions. I certainly don't think CJ Spiller is going to be a 1,200-yard rusher this year. Mark Ingram will get a majority of the carries barring injury. But I think CJ Spiller will be a solid piece of depth. I think he'll get a good amount of receptions, and he'll, especially in PPR leagues, I think he could be a great play to you get him late in the draft because nobody's going to want him early. So you might get to a point you see his name come up and think it might be worth the risk to see if he can get some good yardage, some good receptions, and maybe even take a couple touchdowns because that New Orleans backfield's always a bit crowded, but there are definitely guys who can still find the success in terms of fantasy in there. And I think CJ Spiller, you get him late enough, he could be a very interesting pick. And I think if you were able to get him as your flex, I'd be fairly confident going into a season with him as my flex.
CJ Spiller. You got to get more Bills stuff in here. These Bills. All right, my sleeper. I feel like I have to do it this way. We have Dylan. Can you mute real fast? That echo life is going on, and I had the same problem the last two episodes. For some reason, it came up. But number 10. Not number 10. My sleeper. Jeez, I can't listen to myself. I do not like listening to myself. My sleeper is Latavius Murray of the Oakland Raiders. I'm keeping him in my fantasy football league. Not reluctantly, but I would have liked to make trades, so I didn't keep him as my fifth keeper. That's beside my point. But Latavius Murray blew up at the end of last season. In your playoff pool, in your playoffs, if you picked up Latavius Murray, you had a good time. I picked him up. No, I picked him up and then dropped him and then almost missed the playoffs. I had to change my name to why did I drop Latavius Murray? And I won. I got back into the playoffs by default because Dylan's team choked. But actually, Jimmy Graham choked. But Latavius Murray, very, very good. I've heard Eddie George comparisons. I've heard Le'Veon Bell comparisons. And like I just said earlier about Le'Veon Bell, Latavius Murray touches the ball not only in terms of carries, but in terms of receptions. And in Oakland, I think things are going up. I was a fan of Derek Carr coming out last season, and Amari Cooper is there. I'm not too sure how that's going to turn out, although, I like Derek Carr. Amari Cooper just gets double covered, and who are you going to throw the ball to? So I think Latavius Murray is going to be the guy he throws the ball to when Amari Cooper is double covered. So I think Latavius is going to have a good year next year, and I think he's a very solid flex option. If he's my flex, I'm going to the playoffs. So that's just how Latavius Murray is going to be this season. I am really high on him. I didn't want to talk about him in this show, really, but I feel it's only fair to tell you guys Latavius Murray is the guy to look for in your drafts in that mid-round area, because if you miss out on him, you're going to regret it. So, yeah, and that's pretty much the episode. Dylan, I'm going to let you speak again. So I don't know why the echo happened. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, favorite, subscribe. Next week, we do not know when we are going to go live. It could be anywhere from Wednesday to Sunday. Actually, it can't be on Wednesday and it can't be on Thursday. So, you might work Friday. So, Saturday or Sunday, maybe, depending on how our work schedules go. We're going to get a show in. McDonald's doesn't hold the power over us. We have the power over McDonald's. So next week, Saturday or Sunday, we will do our fourth part in our four-part series of covering fantasy football for the upcoming year. Please tune in at 9 o'clock whenever that happens. Whether it's Saturday or Sunday, we will post it. The time actually may not be certain. So we will post it, and if you subscribe to us, like we have recommended over all of our 17 episodes now, you will know when we're going live, and you'll know when it's uploaded to watch it later. So we will reply to your comments. We will interact with you guys. So thank you for watching. This was a third-part series of our four-part NFL fantasy rankings. So bye.
See y'all next week.